My name is Cassandra Vale. I'm 28 and last Christmas dinner changed everything I thought I knew about family loyalty. When my parents dismissed my freelance marketing career as playing on the computer and my sister Emma smirked while suggesting I get a real job like hers, I never imagined that within 6 months I'd be the one writing their paychecks. The family hierarchy we'd all accepted for years, with Emma as the golden child lawyer and me as the disappointing dreamer, was built on lies so devastating that when the truth finally surfaced, it didn't just flip our dynamics, it shattered them completely. But before I dive into how karma served the most satisfying justice I've ever witnessed, I want to know, where are you watching from today? If this story of family betrayal and sweet revenge resonates with you, hit that like button and subscribe, because trust me, what happened next will make you question everything you think you know about blood being thicker than water. Let's get into this wild ride together. Growing up in the Vale household meant living under a microscope, where every achievement was measured against Emma's golden standard. She was 3 years older, graduated summa cum laude from Harvard Law and landed a prestigious position at Morrison & Associates, one of the city's most respected law firms. Meanwhile, I chose a different path, studying digital marketing, and eventually building my own freelance consultancy from our basement. The contrast couldn't have been starker. Every family gathering became a performance where Emma's latest courtroom victory took center stage while my clients and campaigns were dismissed as internet nonsense. Mom would beam when introducing Emma as our lawyer daughter, but when it came to me, the introduction was always hesitant. And this is Cassandra. She works with computers. Dad, a retired bank manager who valued traditional career paths, never missed an opportunity to express his disappointment. When I was your age, I had a real job with real benefits, he'd say, shaking his head at my laptop setup. This freelance thing isn't sustainable, sweetheart. What happens when you get sick? What about retirement? You need security. The financial disparity only made things worse. Emma drove a sleek BMW, lived in a downtown penthouse, and never hesitated to pick up expensive dinner tabs with a casual wave of her black Amex. I drove a 7-year-old Honda Civic and lived in a modest apartment, carefully budgeting every expense. The optics told a story that my family readily believed. Emma was successful, I was struggling. But what stung most wasn't the financial comparison, it was the assumption that my work lacked value. When I landed my first 5-figure campaign for a local restaurant chain, Dad's response was, "That's nice, honey, but Emma just won a case worth millions." When I explained the complexities of digital marketing strategy, Mom's eyes would glaze over, but she'd listen to Emma dissect legal precedents for hours. The breaking point came during my birthday dinner last year. I'd spent weeks developing a comprehensive marketing strategy for a startup that eventually got acquired for 8 figures, largely due to the brand recognition my campaigns had built. I was proud, exhausted, and hoping for once my family might acknowledge my professional accomplishments. Instead, Emma announced her promotion to senior associate, complete with a salary increase that she made sure to mention was well into 6 figures. The conversation immediately shifted to her success, my news forgotten before I'd even finished sharing it. I watched my parents' faces light up with pride, a glow I'd never seen directed at my achievements. That night, driving home alone while Emma celebrated with our parents at an upscale steakhouse I couldn't afford, I made a decision. I was done seeking their approval. I was done explaining my worth to people who refused to see it. I was done being the family disappointment. I had no idea that this decision would lead me to discoveries that would change everything, not just about my family's perception of success, but about the very foundation of Emma's golden reputation itself. The carefully constructed narrative of sibling rivalry was about to crumble, revealing something far more sinister lurking beneath the surface of our family dynamics. What I thought was simple favoritism was actually a complex web of deception that would soon unravel in ways none of us could have anticipated. Emma's success story, the one my parents had held up as the gold standard for years, was built on a foundation of lies so shocking that when I finally uncovered the truth, it would destroy not just her reputation but the entire framework of our family's understanding of success, failure, and worth. Christmas dinner 2023 was supposed to be a fresh start. I'd had my best financial year yet, having landed 3 major corporate clients, and finally feeling confident about my business trajectory. I'd even bought thoughtful gifts for everyone, including a first edition legal textbook I'd found for Emma that cost me nearly a month's groceries. The evening started predictably. Emma arrived in a new Audi, an upgrade from the BMW, and immediately launched into stories about her latest high-profile case. Mom and Dad hung on every word as she described representing a tech executive in a complex litigation case. The way she told it, she was single-handedly saving the company from financial ruin. "It's such important work," Mom said, refilling Emma's wine glass for the 3rd time. "You're protecting people's livelihoods, sweetheart." I waited for a natural break in the conversation to share my own news. "Actually, I've had some exciting developments too. I just signed a contract with—" "Oh, that's nice," Dad interrupted, without looking up from carving the turkey. "Emma, tell us more about this case. How much is at stake?" Emma smiled that familiar satisfied smile. "Well, without breaking attorney-client privilege, let's just say it's worth more than most people make in several lifetimes." The dismissal was swift and familiar, but something about Emma's expression bothered me. There was a smugness there that went beyond normal sibling rivalry. It was the look of someone holding cards they knew I couldn't see. After dinner, while helping Mom with dishes, the real confrontation began. "Cassandra, honey," Mom said, her voice taking on that careful tone I'd learned to dread. "Your father and I have been talking, and we're concerned about your career path." "What do you mean?" Emma wandered into the kitchen, wine glass in hand, clearly ready for entertainment. "They mean it's time to grow up, Cass." "Excuse me, come on," Emma laughed, leaning against the counter. "You're almost 30, living in that tiny apartment, driving that old car. Don't you want stability, benefits, a retirement plan?" The condescension in her voice was thick enough to cut with a knife. "My business is doing well, Emma. Better than it's ever been." "Playing on the computer isn't a real career," Dad chimed in from the doorway. "Emma has a respectable job. She helps people, makes a real difference in the world." "What I do is real," I said, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. "I help businesses grow, create jobs, build communities. Just because you don't understand it doesn't mean it's not valuable." Emma snorted. "Building communities, Cass? You make Instagram posts for restaurants. I create comprehensive marketing strategies. Why don't you get a respectable job?" Mom interrupted, her voice gentle but cutting. "Something stable like Emma has. Something your father and I can be proud of when people ask what our daughters do." The words hung in the air like a slap. Emma's smirk widened as she watched my face crumble. This wasn't just about career choices, this was about worth, about value, about whether I deserved to take up space in this family. "You know what," I said, setting down the dish towel with shaking hands. "You're right. I should get a respectable job. One where I can be proud of the work I do and the way I do it." The implications of my words sailed right over their heads. They heard surrender where I was declaring war. "That's wonderful, sweetheart," Mom said, relief evident in her voice. "Emma could probably help you find something. Couldn't you, Emma?" Emma's smile was patronizing perfection. "Of course. I'm sure there are some entry-level positions at firms around the city. You might have to start at the bottom, but everyone has to begin somewhere." I looked at my family, really looked at them, and saw people who had spent years convincing themselves that love was conditional on achievement, and achievement was only valid if it fit their narrow definition of success. They had no idea that their golden child's foundation was about to crumble, or that their disappointment was about to become their salvation. "Thanks for the offer," I said, grabbing my coat. but I think I'll find my own way. As I drove home through the empty Christmas streets, I made another decision that would prove more prophetic than I could have imagined. I was going to dig deeper into my business connections, expand my network, and build something so undeniably successful that my family would have no choice but to recognize my worth. I had no idea that this expansion would lead me directly into Emma's professional world and to discoveries that would change everything. The universe has a funny way of providing exactly what you need to uncover the truth, and what I needed was access to the very industry where Emma claimed to be thriving. The irony would soon become clear. While my family pushed me to be more like Emma, I was about to discover that the last thing anyone should want to be was anything like my sister at all. 3 months after that disastrous Christmas dinner, my business had expanded beyond my wildest expectations. I'd been approached by several high-profile clients, including Morrison and Associates, the very law firm where Emma worked. The irony wasn't lost on me, but I approached it professionally, seeing it as an opportunity to prove my worth in her own backyard. The initial meeting was with Margaret Morrison herself, the founding partner. She was impressed with my portfolio and particularly interested in my crisis management experience. "We've had some challenges with our public image lately," she said carefully. "We need someone who can handle sensitive situations with discretion." What she didn't know was that I'd been researching the firm extensively since landing the contract. Part of my process involved deep diving into a company's online presence, competitor analysis, and industry reputation. What I found in those late-night research sessions would haunt me for weeks. It started with inconsistencies in case coverage. Emma had mentioned representing a tech executive in a major litigation case, but when I searched court records and legal databases, I couldn't find any cases matching her description with her name attached. Initially, I assumed I was missing something. Maybe the case was sealed or she was working under a senior partner's supervision. But then I found something that made my blood run cold. While researching Morrison and Associates' recent cases for my campaign strategy, I discovered that the tech executive case Emma had described at Christmas dinner, the one worth more than most people make in several lifetimes, was real. But it wasn't Emma's case. It was being handled by James Rothschild, a senior partner with 20 years of experience. My hands shook as I dug deeper. The case details Emma had shared matched Rothschild's case perfectly down to the specific legal challenges and timeline. She had stolen someone else's story and presented it as her own. This discovery led me down a rabbit hole that consumed the next 2 weeks. I used every research tool at my disposal, cross-referencing legal databases, court records, and firm publications. What I found was a pattern of deception so systematic it took my breath away. Emma hadn't won any of the major cases she'd claimed credit for over the past 2 years. In fact, according to the court records I could access, she'd barely handled any significant cases at all. Her actual work seemed to consist primarily of document review and basic research, the kind of tasks typically assigned to first-year associates, not someone with her supposed level of experience. But the most devastating discovery came when I found a sealed personnel file that had been accidentally included in a publicly accessible case document. The file revealed that Emma had been under internal investigation for billing irregularities and had received multiple warnings about her caseload performance. As I'm sharing this incredible story with you, I can't help but think about how appearances can be so deceiving. If you're enjoying these shocking revelations, please hit that like button and stick around, because what I discovered next completely changed my understanding of my family's dynamics. The truth about Emma's career was just the beginning. The most damning evidence came from an unexpected source. While developing Morrison and Associates' marketing strategy, I had legitimate access to review their case management system to understand their workflow and achievements. What I found there destroyed any remaining doubt about Emma's deception. She was listed as a junior associate, not the senior position she'd claimed. Her billable hours were consistently below firm standards. Most shocking of all, there were several notes from partners expressing concern about her work quality and professional conduct, but it was the financial records that revealed the true scope of her lies. The salary she'd bragged about, the one that had made my parents beam with pride, was inflated by at least 60%. Her actual compensation was barely above what I was making in my supposedly unsuccessful freelance business. The Audi, the penthouse, the expensive dinners, none of it added up to her real income. I spent hours trying to understand how she was funding this lifestyle, cross-referencing her known income with her visible expenses. The math was impossible unless she had another source of funding. That's when I discovered the trust fund. Hidden in the depths of public records, I found documentation of a family trust established by our late grandmother, a trust that had been funding Emma's lifestyle for years. The monthly distributions were substantial, easily covering the gap between her actual salary and her lavish spending. But here's the twist that changed everything. According to the trust documents, both Emma and I were supposed to be beneficiaries. The trust was designed to provide equal support to both granddaughters until age 35, at which point the remaining principal would be distributed equally. I had never received a single payment from this trust. I had never even known it existed. The implications hit me like a physical blow. Emma hadn't just been lying about her professional success, she'd been stealing my inheritance. For years she'd been collecting not only her portion of the trust distributions but mine as well, using the money to fund the lifestyle that made her appear more successful than she actually was. My hands trembled as I printed out the evidence. Bank records, trust documents, court filings, everything painted a picture of systematic fraud and family betrayal that went far deeper than career jealousy. Emma hadn't just let our parents believe she was more successful than me. She'd actively stolen the resources that should have helped level the playing field between us. As I sat in my small apartment surrounded by evidence of my sister's deception, I realized that everything I'd believed about my family was built on lies. The golden child narrative, the pressure to achieve, the constant comparisons, all of it had been orchestrated by someone who was not only failing to meet the standards she'd set for me, but was actively cheating to maintain her facade. The question now wasn't whether I would expose the truth, it was how I would use it to ensure that justice was finally served. Armed with this devastating information, I found myself in an impossible position. Part of me wanted to immediately confront Emma and my parents with the evidence, but I knew that approach would likely backfire. Emma was, after all, still a lawyer, albeit not the successful one she pretended to be, and she'd be prepared to spin and deflect. I needed to be strategic. My first step was ensuring I had all the facts. I reached out to the trust administrator, introducing myself as a potential beneficiary, seeking information about my grandmother's estate. The conversation was enlightening and horrifying in equal measure. "Miss Vale," the administrator said, reviewing her files, "I've been wondering when you'd contact us. Your sister has been collecting your distributions for years, claiming you'd signed a power of attorney, authorizing her to manage your portion of the trust." My blood turned to ice. "I never signed any such document." There was a long pause. "I see. Miss Vale, I think you should come in to discuss this matter in person. There may be some irregularities that need to be addressed." The meeting at the trust office revealed the full scope of Emma's deception. She had forged my signature on multiple documents, created fake correspondence, claiming I was traveling internationally and unable to manage my own affairs, and had been systematically draining my portion of the trust for over 4. The total amount stolen was staggering, nearly $180,000 that should have been mine. Money that could have helped me expand my business, buy a house, or simply provided the financial security my parents constantly worried I lacked. But Emma's fraud went even deeper. The trust administrator showed me correspondence where Emma had actually convinced our parents that I had refused my inheritance, claiming I was too proud to accept family money, and had asked her to donate my portion to charity. This lie had further cemented their view of me as irresponsible and financially unstable. "Your parents were quite moved by your supposed selflessness," the administrator said sadly. "They praised Emma for handling such a difficult situation with such grace. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. Emma hadn't just stolen my money, she'd used the theft to further manipulate our parents' perception of both of us. She appeared generous and responsible for managing a difficult situation, while I appeared ungrateful and foolish for supposedly rejecting financial help. But I wasn't done investigating. If Emma was capable of this level of deception with family money, what else might she be hiding?" I used my access to Morrison and Associates systems to dig deeper into her professional conduct. What I found was a pattern of behavior that explained how she'd maintained her position despite her poor performance. She was blackmailing a senior partner. The evidence was buried in archived email threads that should have been deleted but had been preserved due to a litigation hold. Emma had discovered that Robert Morrison, Margaret's nephew and a named partner, had been embezzling client funds to cover gambling debts. Instead of reporting it, she'd been using the information to secure favorable treatment case assignments and protection from scrutiny. This revelation explained how she'd managed to keep her job despite multiple performance issues. It also revealed that she was actively participating in covering up financial crimes that could devastate the firm and harm innocent clients. The web of deception was staggering. Emma wasn't just lying to our family, she was involved in serious criminal activity. The trust fund theft, the forgery, the blackmail, the cover-up of embezzlement, each revelation was worse than the last. But what truly broke my heart was discovering why she'd gone to such lengths to maintain her facade. In her personal files, which I accessed while documenting the trust fraud for legal purposes, I found dozens of saved articles about successful women, career achievement guides, and financial planning documents. She'd been desperately trying to live up to an image of success that she knew she couldn't achieve legitimately. The pressure our parents had put on both of us had twisted her into someone unrecognizable. While I had responded by working harder and finding my own path, she had chosen deception and crime. The golden child narrative had corrupted her so completely that she'd rather commit federal crimes than admit she wasn't living up to expectations. As I compiled all this evidence, I realized I held the power to destroy not just Emma's career but potentially her freedom. The trust fraud alone was a serious felony, and her involvement in covering up embezzlement could result in disbarment and criminal charges. But I also realized that this wasn't just about Emma anymore. The firm's clients deserved to know their money was being stolen. The legal system deserved to know that officers of the court were committing crimes. And my parents deserved to know the truth about both their daughters. The question was no longer what Emma had done, it was what I was going to do about it. I spent sleepless nights weighing my options. I could take the evidence to the authorities and watch Emma's life crumble, but that would devastate our parents and potentially make me look vindictive. I could confront Emma privately and demand restitution, but that would allow her to continue her other criminal activities. Or I could find a way to ensure justice was served while protecting the innocent people caught in the crossfire. As I sat in my small apartment, surrounded by evidence of crimes and betrayals, I realized that this decision would define not just Emma's future, but mine as well. The power to deliver justice was in my hands, and how I chose to use it would determine what kind of person I truly was. The answer when it came to me was both elegant and devastating. I wouldn't just expose Emma's crimes, I would let her expose herself, ensuring that the truth came to light in a way that protected everyone except those who truly deserved consequences. The plan I formulated would ensure that justice was served, not through revenge, but through the natural consequences of Emma's own choices finally catching up with her. Creating a plan that would ensure justice while protecting innocent parties required careful choreography. I couldn't simply dump evidence and hope for the best. I needed to orchestrate a revelation that would make Emma's crimes undeniable while giving victims a chance to protect themselves. My first move was securing my own legal position. I hired Sarah Chan, a criminal defense attorney specializing in financial crimes, and presented her with all my evidence. Her reaction was immediate and serious. Cassandra, what your sister has done constitutes multiple felonies, she said, reviewing the trust documents. The forgery alone carries a potential 20-year sentence, combined with the blackmail and conspiracy charges. She's looking at serious prison time. Sarah helped me file a complaint with the appropriate authorities, but we agreed to delay any public action until I could warn the innocent parties who might be affected. This wasn't about revenge, it was about ensuring that justice was served responsibly. Next, I reached out to Margaret Morrison through our existing professional relationship. I requested a private meeting under the pretense of discussing an expansion of my marketing services. When we met, I carefully presented the evidence of Robert Morrison's embezzlement and Emma's cover-up. Margaret's face went through a range of emotions: shock, anger, disappointment, and finally grim determination. "How long have you known about this?" she asked. "I discovered it while researching for your campaign," I said honestly. "I debated whether to come forward, but I couldn't be complicit in ongoing crimes against your clients." She appreciated my approach and immediately began implementing damage control measures. An emergency audit was launched, client accounts were secured, and plans were made to report the crimes to the State Bar Association and criminal authorities. "What about Emma?" Margaret asked. "That's not my decision to make," I replied. "But I thought you should know before law enforcement contacts the firm." The next phase involved my parents. This was the most delicate part of the entire plan because I knew the truth would devastate them. But they deserved to know why their perceptions of both daughters had been so skewed. I invited them to dinner at a neutral location, a quiet restaurant where we could talk privately. I brought copies of all the relevant documents organized in a folder that told the story chronologically. "Mom, Dad," I began carefully, "I need to share some information with you that's going to be difficult to hear. It's about Emma, and about some financial matters that affect our family." I started with the trust fund, showing them the original documents that established equal distributions to both daughters. I watched their faces change as they realized I had never received any money, never refused any inheritance, and never asked Emma to donate anything to charity. "She told us you were too proud to accept help," Mom whispered, her face pale. "She told you that to cover up the fact that she was stealing my portion," I replied gently. "But that's not the worst of it." I then revealed Emma's actual position at the law firm, her real salary, and the source of funding for her lavish lifestyle. I showed them the performance reviews, the billing irregularities, and the criminal investigations she was facing. Dad sat in stunned silence as the full scope of the deception became clear. "All these years," he said finally, "we thought she was the successful one. She wanted you to think that," I said, "and she was willing to commit serious crimes to maintain that illusion." The final piece of my plan involved Emma herself. Rather than confronting her directly, I decided to let the consequences of her actions create the confrontation naturally. I knew that once the investigations began, she would quickly realize that her crimes had been discovered. I didn't have to wait long. 2 days after my meeting with Margaret Morrison, my phone rang. Emma's name appeared on the screen, and when I answered, her voice was shaking with rage and panic. "What did you do?" she demanded. "I reported crimes to the appropriate authorities," I replied calmly. "The same thing any responsible citizen should do." "You vindictive bitch," she screamed. "You're destroying my life because you're jealous." The irony was breathtaking. Even faced with evidence of her own criminal behavior, she was trying to frame me as the villain. "Emma, you destroyed your own life." "I just stopped pretending I didn't know about it. Mom and Dad will never forgive you for this," she threatened. "Actually, they already know everything I said. They know about the trust fund, the forgery, the lies about your career. They know all of it." The silence that followed was deafening. Emma had built her entire adult identity on the lie that she was the successful daughter, the golden child, the one who made our parents proud. In one conversation, that entire foundation had crumbled. "You have no idea what you've done," she whispered finally. "I know exactly what I've done," I replied. "I've ensured that the truth finally came to light." As I hung up the phone, I felt a complex mix of emotions. There was satisfaction in knowing that justice would be served, but also sadness for the family dynamics that had driven Emma to such extremes. The pressure to be perfect, to be successful, to be worthy of love had corrupted her so completely that she'd chosen crime over honesty. But I also felt something I hadn't experienced in years: vindication. Every dismissive comment, every comparison, every suggestion that I needed to get a real job had been based on lies and stolen money. My parents' disappointment in me had been manufactured by someone who was not only less successful than she appeared but actively criminal. The trap had been set not by me but by Emma herself. I had simply ensured that the consequences of her choices could no longer be hidden or ignored. The beautiful irony was that her own arrogance and need to maintain her facade had provided me with all the evidence I needed to expose her. In trying so hard to appear successful, Emma had created a paper trail of lies and crimes that made her downfall inevitable. All I had done was follow that trail to its logical conclusion. The aftermath unfolded with swift and devastating efficiency. Within a week of my revelations, Emma's carefully constructed world collapsed entirely. The State Bar Association launched an immediate investigation, the FBI opened a case for the trust fund fraud, and Morrison and Associates terminated her employment pending the outcome of multiple criminal investigations. But the most profound changes weren't legal, they were personal. My parents, once Emma's biggest champions, were forced to confront the reality that their golden child had been living a lie built on stolen money and criminal activity. The daughter they'd held up as the standard of success was facing potential decades in prison, while the daughter they'd constantly criticized had been the victim of systematic theft and fraud. The role reversal was complete when Emma, facing mounting legal bills and the loss of her inflated income, was forced to move back into our childhood bedroom. Meanwhile, I was hired by Morrison and Associates not just as their marketing consultant but as a special advisor, helping them rebuild their reputation after the embezzlement scandal. The irony was perfect. Emma had spent years claiming I needed to get a respectable job, and now I was literally helping to clean up the mess her disrespectful behavior had created at her former firm. The trust fund restitution process moved quickly once the authorities became involved. Not only was I entitled to the $180,000 Emma had stolen, but I was also awarded damages and interest that brought the total to nearly $250,000. For the first time in my adult life, I had the financial security my parents had always worried I lacked, security that had been mine all along, stolen by the very person they'd believed was more successful. Emma's legal troubles multiplied as investigators dug deeper. The trust fund fraud was just the beginning. The forgery charges, the blackmail conspiracy, and her role in covering up Robert Morrison's embezzlement created a web of criminal liability that her public defender couldn't untangle. She ultimately accepted a plea deal that included 5 years in federal prison, full restitution to all victims, and permanent disbarment. But perhaps the most satisfying moment came during Emma's sentencing hearing. Our parents sat in the gallery, finally understanding the full scope of their daughter's deception. When the judge asked if Emma had anything to say before sentencing, she stood and delivered an apology that was years overdue. "Your Honor," she said, her voice breaking, "I want to apologize to my sister Cassandra, whose money I stole and whose reputation I damaged through my lies. I also want to apologize to my parents, who believed in a version of me that never really existed." The judge was unmoved. "Miss Vale," he said sternly, "your crimes weren't just financial, they were betrayals of the deepest trust. You stole from family, deceived your parents, and corrupted the legal profession you swore to uphold. The court hopes that during your incarceration you'll reflect on the person you chose to become and work toward becoming someone worthy of the forgiveness you'll need to seek." After the sentencing, my parents and I sat in the courthouse parking lot, processing everything that had happened. The silence stretched for long minutes before Dad finally spoke. "I owe you an apology, Cassandra," he said, his voice heavy with regret. "We failed you. We believed lies, we dismissed your achievements, and we made you feel like you weren't good enough when you were actually the one living with integrity." Mom was crying quietly. "All those times we pressured you to be more like Emma. We were asking you to be more like someone who was stealing and lying. We were so wrong." The vindication I'd dreamed of for years felt bittersweet. Yes, I'd been proven right about my worth and my choices, but the cost had been our family's destruction. Emma would spend the next 5 years in prison. Our parents were grappling with guilt and betrayal, and the family dynamics we'd known our entire lives were permanently shattered. But from those ashes something new began to grow. My parents started actually listening when I talked about my work, asking questions and showing genuine interest in my achievements. They began to understand that success isn't just about salary figures or traditional career paths, it's about integrity, hard work, and making a positive impact. My business flourished in ways I'd never imagined. The Morrison & Associates contract led to referrals from other high-profile firms, and my reputation for discretion and thoroughness during their crisis became a significant selling point. The financial security from the trust fund restitution allowed me to expand my operation, hire employees, and take on larger projects. 6 months after Emma's sentencing, I was featured in a major business magazine as one of the city's most innovative marketing entrepreneurs. The article detailed how I'd built a successful consultancy from nothing, how I'd helped major firms navigate crisis situations, and how I'd done it all while maintaining ethical standards that many in my industry had abandoned. When the magazine hit newsstands, my parents bought multiple copies. Dad called me, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm sorry it took us so long to see what everyone else could see," he said. "We're proud of you, sweetheart. We're proud of who you are and what you've built." The journey from family disappointment to family pride hadn't been easy, but it had been necessary. Emma's crimes had forced everyone to confront the difference between appearance and reality, between success and the image of success, between love and conditional approval. As I'm wrapping up this incredible story, I have to ask, have you ever experienced family dynamics where appearances masked painful truths? How do you think karma works in family situations where someone has been treated unfairly for years? Sometimes the people who seem to have it all together are actually falling apart behind the scenes, while those who are dismissed as failures are quietly building something amazing. If this story of family betrayal and ultimate justice resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more true stories about overcoming family drama and finding your own path to success. Share this video with anyone who's ever been made to feel like they're not living up to family expectations. Sometimes the problem isn't with us, it's with the expectations themselves. Thank you for taking this journey with me, and remember, integrity and hard work will always triumph over deception and shortcuts, even when it takes time for the truth to surface. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all, it's simply living well and letting karma handle the rest. Family loyalty should never come at the cost of justice and blood. Being thicker than water doesn't mean we should ignore when that blood is tainted by lies and theft. Trust your instincts, value your own worth, and never let anyone make you feel small for choosing honesty over appearances. The most important lesson I learned from this whole experience is that real success isn't about what others think of you. It's about being able to look at yourself in the mirror and respect the person looking back. Emma lost that a long time ago, but I never did, and that made all the difference.